short segment, long segment coming up. Give us your bottom line as one of the top experts out there studying the flu, and you have the big flu tracker tracking it worldwide, of why are they taking this so serious? Why are they saying they're getting ready for forced inoculations and quarantines over something that's killed a couple hundred people in the United States?
Okay, well, it really has to do with the history of pandemics in the past and the similarity of this particular pandemic in 2009 with the pandemic in 1918. Just as a refresher, the 1918 pandemic killed between 20 and 50 million people worldwide. And the population back in 1918 was about a quarter of what the population is today. It infected about a third of the world's population between 1918 and 1919. And the people that were dying were generally young, previously healthy adults between the ages of 20 and 45. It actually ended World War I because it was so widespread, because so many of the troops were dying from it. The concern is that this is a rerun. The virus in 1918 was a swine virus that jumped into the human population, and it recombined and came up with a new version. The virus in 1918 did exactly what 2009 did. In the spring, it started out as a mild disease. In fact, the physicians that were looking at patients in the spring of 1918 didn't even think it was influenza because it was so mild. And then the virus evolved, and in the fall, it came back with a vengeance, and it ended up killing the large number of people. The 2009 is really behaving the same way. It is a swine virus which has jumped to humans. The last time a swine virus jumped to humans and was easily transmitted was 1918. There was some of your listeners may be old enough to remember 1976, which was the swine flu vaccine. In that case, it was the soldier at Fort Dix that died, and a few hundred soldiers at Fort Dix were infected. That led to the vaccine program, but by the time the vaccine was ready, the virus had essentially burned itself out. It never really got out of Fort
But also, they had to suspend the program because the vaccine paralyzed and killed so many people.
Well, there were side effects, and it was, it did put a black mark on the vaccine, and it was kind of a rushed vaccine because there was a lot of concern that it was going to spread, and it was going to be a repeat in 1918. But there's a big difference between what happened in 1976 and what happened in 2009.
Well, why is Obama, sir, Dr. Niman, saying he wants to take 3 or 4? Will it be 5 next week, or will we take shots every morning with our Wheaties? Or
well, here's the way the vaccines work. I mean, there's 2 different issues. The swine, which is the pandemic, the H1N1, which is causing the pandemic, is a swine virus. It's not a human virus. The seasonal flu vaccine is called a trivalent vaccine because it's made of 3 different seasonal flus. It's made of an H1N1 human, an H3N2 human, and an influenza B. So that is recommended, on a yearly basis because the virus changes so quickly that the immunity that's generated by the vaccine 1 year generally doesn't carry over that efficiently to the next year because the virus has evolved and changed. And that's what an annual flu vaccine is. It's once a year. Children getting it for the first time, they take it twice because they need a booster. And that's the seasonal flu. And that's totally separate from the pandemic flu. The pandemic flu is swine, so there's not much, if any, it probably is no cross-reactivity.
But they've been saying it's not proper to even call it swine flu now.
Well, that's a political issue. Not calling it swine is more of a WHO political. They're afraid that people are going to go around killing pigs. In the false belief that is how it's transmitted. And that's not. I mean, the point is that the virus has jumped.
Yeah.
So now people that are getting infected with swine flu are not getting infected by pigs. They're getting infected by other people.
Well, Doc, you know what's funny? Back in January and February, I had guests on, emergency managers and people, where they were getting ready for mass graves and flu pandemics this coming fall. And then magically, this all just pops up. And don't worry, they're there with shots in the Army to take good care of you.
So just to clarify, that was bird flu. This is swine flu. but we'll talk after the break.
Well, they're just building up this big infrastructure to keep us safe. And they got the Gardasil to keep our girls safe, too. Just take the shots. Everybody loves you. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Do you understand how dark it is? How far down the line we are? How late it is?
I was getting into the mass graves, the Army getting ready, the emergency managers back in January of this year. And they were just saying flu. Whenever I would have the emergency managers on, they said flu, bird flu, deadly flu. And we see this huge infrastructure being built, Northcom running drills everywhere, major cities having regular Army Reserve, Marines out running checkpoints, building up. This thing looks staged to me, but it sounds like you're just going off the science and saying the flu looks like it could be a danger or it isn't a danger. Explain this to me from your perspective.
And like I say, I'd rather stick to the science. Getting to pandemic preparedness and the political side, kind of a little out of my area of expertise. But just as a comment, that the issue of potential pandemic from bird flu has really been at the top of a lot of lists going back to 2005 or so. The swine flu really emerged. It's not that there hasn't been flu in swine before, but the transmission of the swine flu from human to human really became obvious in April of this year. In March of this year, the end of March, beginning of April, and that's when it became apparent that there was a pandemic. Nobody really knew about the pandemic involving swine until April of this year. But the reason is being taken quite seriously really has to do with the history of the 1918, and that's really the reason there's been the pandemic preparedness. Actually, there's a law, and again, it's getting a little bit out of my area, but the declaring bird flu a quarantinable disease actually was signed by President Bush back in April 1st of 2005, and that coincided with healthcare workers dying in North Vietnam as a result of H5N1. So the potential of a pandemic of one sort or another has been around, for several years now in a very real way. But the swine flu is kind of a little bit different than the bird flu. It's harder for the birds to jump to humans because that's avian to mammal. It's much easier for swine because that's mammal to mammal. So it is quite a bit different from one species to the other, but it is a species jump. And that is what is causing the concern. And as far as the numbers are concerned, they're quite a bit higher than 200 as far as deaths are concerned. And
well, hold on. Doctor, let me stop you because I can pull these numbers up, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but the CDC 3 weeks ago said they're going to stop reporting flu fatalities with the swine flu, as it's known. Let me just put this out there because I can pull up the CDC. They say it was like 198 and then less than 2,000. It was right at 2,000 worldwide. Are you saying those are wrong numbers?
Oh, those are very low numbers. If you go to the flu tracker, just Google flu tracker.
Yeah, that's your site, isn't it?
Right, and it's got running totals. And
I know you're the big expert on the real numbers, so that's why I brought this up. Tell us what the real numbers are.
Well, the real numbers. Well, here's a number that'll probably get your attention. In Argentina, in the last month or so, there have been probably over 1,000 that have died in that country alone in just a 1 month period. The official numbers, yesterday Argentina came out with official numbers and said that there were 337 dead, and they said there were 400 more that were dead but hadn't been tested. So they admitted on their government website in Argentina that there were likely to be over 700. I've got boots on the ground actually in Argentina, journalists who are actually doing stories for is again mainstream media, but they are on the ground, and I do get reports back, and they say it's over 1,000. So there's 1,000.
Where are you getting your numbers? I mean, how are you getting your numbers? Because I keep hearing that it gets underreported some places, but other times they list it as a swine flu, but then later find out it wasn't.
No, that's pretty rare that they list it as swine flu and find out it isn't. It's usually the other way around, that the people test negative and then they discover on autopsy that it was swine flu. The numbers, most of the numbers that are used to flu tracker actually come from government reports. The U.S. is pulling back, but just to clarify that, they're pulling back mostly on the mild cases